welcome to Holistic Counselling and Psychotherapy Tutor. We've been looking over the last few episodes at Petruska Clarkson's 5 relational framework for integration in counselling and psychotherapy. Today, we're going to look at some of the pros and cons of Clarkson's framework, which may be helpful for you for revision or for new learning, or perhaps for some essay writing that you're doing. Please feel free to like, follow, share, and subscribe. So when we're starting to think about Petruska Clarkson's framework, what we see is a 5 relationship framework. We see the working alliance, the transferential relationship, the developmentally needed or reparative relationship, the person-to-person relationship, and the transpersonal relationship. And Clarkson describes these as all being available to some extent or another within every therapeutic encounter with clients. She was perhaps a little bit ahead of her time in terms of integration in therapy. When we think about integration now, most therapists or lots of therapies move away from these purist models, and lots of research now is supporting the idea that actually the relationship, the quality of the relationship between client and therapist is a key precursor to change. It's the quality of that relationship that really facilitates and heals a client. So let's think about Clarkson's framework. We've taken a look at what it is. We've taken a look at integration and what integration is. But the advantage perhaps of Clarkson's framework is that it offers a consistent, within these 5 relationships, there is a consistent and coherent integrative approach to psychotherapy. It gives a very clear framework as to what a therapeutic relationship can look like. It gives us a way of making meaning of and making understanding of what's going on within a therapeutic encounter with clients. Right? So we're able as integrative therapists to anchor ourselves in the space using this 5 relational framework. And from that framework, we are able to draw on concepts from various different theories to enhance and build and facilitate the quality of that relationship. So it's a consistent and coherent integrative approach to psychotherapy that has been developed by Petruska Clarkson. It really does offer us that means to intellectually and experientially in the space engaging with the systemic complexity of the relationship. It's so multifaceted, it's so multi-layered and multi-dimensional, but it gives us a way of intellectualizing and a way of experientially engaging with the complexity of the relationship. And this is true within all psychotherapies or approaches. It allows us to kind of make sense of and make meaning of and engage with such a range of different concepts and brings them together into a coherent and consistent whole. So in that sense, it's really providing a conceptual principle for integration between these different approaches. We all know that person-centered theory is very different to psychodynamic is different to CBT, is different to Gestalt. There's such a range and variance there. But it really gives us that principle of integrating these various different approaches so we can integrate concepts from different spaces, from different theories in terms of the reparative relationship, or how we build a working alliance with clients, how we're understanding transference, how we perceive and make sense and make meaning of a person-to-person relationship. We're allowed to draw on concepts from a range of theories to make meaning of and understand our client and the therapeutic relationship within this kind of 5 relationship principle of integration. And that allows us to some extent, to reconcile differences between these underlying theories. We're keeping the relationship at the center of the work, the quality of the relationship, and holding in mind the 5 relationships that exist. The other advantage, perhaps, of Clarkson's framework is that it is supported by such a wealth of research demonstrating the importance of the quality of the relationship for client outcomes. So lots and lots of research available now around how important the therapeutic encounter is, the fundamental, that working alliance, the quality of the therapeutic work, that working at relational depth, that use of relational immediacy. These things are all incredibly important in terms of thinking about client outcomes. And in that sense, Petruska Clarkson's theory has really stood the test of time. This is something that she's developed years ago and actually is very relevant and very, very aligned to much more recent research findings around the necessity of the therapeutic relationship for client outcomes. We think of people like Lambert and Lambert, it's almost, the theory is almost irrelevant in the space. It takes up so little, or it contributes so little to client outcomes. Actually, therapist factors, client factors are a much bigger proportion of what can facilitate change. So those are some of the advantages, perhaps, to Clarkson's framework. It gives us an anchor in the room. It allows us to make sense and make meaning of client material. It allows us to keep the relationship at the center of the work and gives us a framework to understand what it is we're doing, and a framework to be able to draw on various psychological concepts to facilitate us with that. However, there are some disadvantages. Nothing is perfect. So you could argue that there's a lack of containment that can arise, certainly from the sense of inconsistency. Theories are very different. So there can be a sense of inconsistency between theories, techniques, underlying attitudes and values. For some people, when they're thinking about certainly integration generally, and we have to include Petruska Clarkson's relational framework in that, some people might argue that the therapist lacks a positioning, lacks a kind of structure or a firm foundation in not having a purist theoretical model to work from. So this kind of idea, or one of the cons might be that a therapist might be perceived as trying to be all things to all people, right? But lacking a specific position or a specific underlying philosophy and anchoring in the space. Other people might argue that it's muddled. It's this kind of pick and mix approach. It's a bit eclectic in nature, doing a bit of this and a bit of that. I think I personally would argue against that, because I think it does offer a relatively clear and coherent structure to the work. But it comes up as a disadvantage to integration is this idea of a muddled pick and mix type approach. Or the kind of quote that I've heard often too is jack of all trades and master of none, because you're not aligning yourself to a specific purist theory. You're not object relations, or you're not psychodynamic, or you're not necessarily singularly person-centered. But in fact, you might utilize elements of all of those to understand and make sense of these 5 relationships. So the other disadvantage then is that you become a jack of all trades and a master of none. You're going to have a very different understanding of therapy and a therapeutic relationship than someone who's, studied 7 years with one theory, right? Because actually you're having to learn multiple theories, or you're having to learn a wider range perhaps of concepts which don't always align neatly together. And that can be another challenge of the framework. How do we pull together concepts from very opposing and conflicting theories and bring them together in the service of the client, in the service of the therapeutic relationship? So that's a little look at the advantages and disadvantages of Clarkson's relational framework. Please do feel free to like, follow, share, and subscribe. For now, take care. I look forward to seeing you on my next videos.